Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're joining us for our previous video, hey, we love to see it, and I hope you're doing well. I was not expecting this to be the last TBS season, but hee hee ho ho, here it is. And the common consensus around this season has been honestly the widest sliding scale I've seen in recent memory. Some say the show is the worst it's ever been. Others laud it as a celebration of 20 years of American Dad. So, where does it really fall? Well, there's only one way to find out, and 3 questions that must be asked. What worked, what failed, what public domain space jams will be curtailed? There's more Hayley stories than we've ever seen here in Season 19. "20 years of American Dad." 20 years. It's absolutely wild to me that it took us 20 years to get an episode that absolutely perfected the formula of a Stan, Francine, and Roger story. Yeah, that's right. Grocery Store Bank is perfect, and I'll fight anyone by the fishmongers that disagree. What's the story? Roger, Stan, and Francine think of hypothetical ways they could rob a bank in the new grocery store. That's it. B-story? Nah, dog. This is the whole focus of the episode, and it's perfect. Roger drugs the trio so they all have memory loss so they can't come clean when they actually do rob the bank, and they have to try and figure out where they hid it while Agent Turlington hunts them down. And I never thought I'd say this, but Turlington is the weakest element of this otherwise fantastic episode. Not a bad element at all, just, the weakest element. I try and avoid watching reviews before I talk about these episodes, but I did come across quite a few people complaining about how dumb this episode was, and I just honestly don't see it. Stan, Francine, and Roger work fantastically off of each other, and I love that it's just a daydream turned reality. There was a point where Roger was the antagonist of a lot of the series, someone that would always sow some chaos and add to the conflict or be the central conflict of an episode. But through the TBS era, we've seen Langley grow more and more chaotic on its own to the point that Roger's schemes are the everyday. And while this will be prevalent through the season, this really sets the pace for what we can expect. A perfect understanding of the family and how they react with Langley as it warps more and more around them. Langley gets weirder, but the Smiths are the same weird they've always been. Like the Langley of 10 seasons ago wouldn't have trashed the grocery store at the drop of a hat to steal all that money. They'd still be shopping at conservative Red State Grocery or whatever it was. And I mean, look at the cast of this episode. It's full of common voices like Ted Danson, Craig Robinson, Laurie Metcalf, Andrew Daly, Chris Parnell, and so many others. The only new voice is Victoria Melee as a shopper. That's it. These are voices and characters that have made the TBS era the incredible evolution it was. These vocal powerhouses elevate the episode that much more just by being there. Grocery Store Bank is just this perfectly sculpted, dumb, everyday adventure. Over 355 episodes in, and we're still getting peak. I frickin' love it. Grocery Store Bank is a Mama and Baba memorializing 10 out of 10. I adore that Mama and Baba bit. I thought that was just a great extra joke. Welcome to the start of the theme of the season, Hayley. That's it. Literally just Hayley. This is the first of like 6 Hayley episodes in a 22 episode season. For comparison, the average was around 3 episodes a season until this one, which is fascinating, especially considering Steve has maybe 3, maybe if we stretch it 4. So yeah, Hayley is our big focus. That being said, if there was a Hayley episode to cut from the season, I'd actually say if it's not one later in the season, it would absolutely be this one. Hayley is burnt out from work and being pushed around, and Roger offers for her to take a vacation in the beautiful Langley Laguna in a totally not the White Lotus parody. Hayley wants to show that kindness gets you more things than being mean to people, and Roger wants to prove she's dumb as hell for thinking that. Jeff then has to turn to threatening the staff to make sure Hayley gets her way to prove that being nice has its benefits. Oh, and then, of course, Hayley gets the win madness and things go off the rails, all classic American Dad Americana. The B story? The CIA has to rebrand after losing funding, and so they decide to make cakes because, of course, they do. It's a dumb B story, but you know what? I like seeing the CIA be dumb. Duff Goldman of Ace of Cakes even guest stars, though his model isn't him. It's odd. I don't know. Feels sloppy. It's okay. The jokes are fine. The stories really kind of just fall apart as they hit the third act, and it just feels very samey throughout. Despite it being weird and out there, it was oddly predictable. Hayley being frustrated with people abusing retail and restaurant workers is just a little too real for such an absurd episode. You want Hayley's ideals to be true, even if it's more realistic that they wouldn't be. It's just an odd premise to not actually have a proper resolution to. It's an episode that just sort of spins its wheels, and by the end you just go, yeah, that sure was an episode of American Dad. The Brown Lotus is a botched anal bleached 5 out of 10. Stan and Roger are fighting when Stan has a performance review coming up and Roger wants to audition for a play, and they don't understand why they're still friends. After an accident, Francine has Dr. Calgary graft Roger onto Stan, and the two have to figure out how to work together and rekindle their friendship. Now, I think that's actually kind of the point, though, for you to go, They acknowledge everything that happened in the past. They call back to everything from the Fox and TBS era, and it actually feels like they took the time to make it count. It's a predictable A story, but a familiar one. It never overcomplicates itself, but the jokes are just predictable and stale for the A story at least. The B story is fantastic. The rest of the family finds themselves confiding in a papier-mâché version of Klaus instead of the real thing, and the real fish gets jealous. However, they realize they need to quit because they do care about the real Klaus, and it's just, chef's kiss. It's terrific. Like, I know I bring it up a lot, but look at how far Klaus has come as a character. The family actively recognizes that Klaus is a member of the family and not just some German fish. TBS has been all about evolving Klaus, and this is his best chaotic self this season. We're also getting a lot of just messing around and playing with the intro this season, which is terrific. American Dad really kinda does it right, and I think that's why this episode doesn't bother me as much. It's like the family recognizes they live in an animated sitcom, but not in an over-the-top way like with Family Guy, where they're always trying to add that extra joke. They recognize the formulas now. They call out when Roger is going to be someone that pushes the story. They play with the intro, but it was all adjusted so incrementally that it feels natural at this point. They earned these manipulations of the formula. They earned the viewer's trust, and they never take it for granted. And I know that sounds dumb, but think about it. As odd as it is, compare it to something like Phineas and Ferb. What makes Phineas and Ferb work so well is how it establishes a formula to their episodes, and the more you watch, the more they can manipulate that formula to make the jokes work. The boys have a scheme. Candace tries to tell their mom about said scheme. Perry the Platypus takes down Doofenshmirtz and destroys the scheme before the boys get caught. You can manipulate any element of that formula and kids get it, because it's a great way to teach them basic story structure and how to manipulate it effectively. The episode itself is nothing, but it lets you really appreciate the new normal of the TBS era. I've Got a Friend in Me is a rambling, tangent-inducing 5 out of 10. After a gas leak from one of Stan's famous cheap stoves, the family decide they want to go on an adventure, and instead of going to Mount Everest, Stan takes them to Chimborazo in Ecuador to save money. The family hates the trip. They are just absolutely devastated until they're taken up to the beautiful Chimborazo with their guide Vincente, played by the always fluffy Gabriel Iglesias. Oh, and Klaus is doing a thing with Zorps. As the family learns to love Chimborazo, they help Vincento protect it from the evil that is Pixar creators. They try to keep Chimborazo a secret to hide its beauty, and so it's not destroyed by tourism. Stan is cheap, so he makes the family suffer until they find their own way to enjoy themselves. And that's really it. Again, very formulaic, but not stale. The jokes are the focus of the episode, and it's honestly great. And it's elevated that much more by the fact that Chimborazo is a very real place, and while they obviously mystify it, it's everything you'd expect from a classic Smith family adventure. It's like Into Fat Air, except they know to still have the family joking with one another and not trying to kill another family. That would be really odd for an animated sitcom to do. Touch the Sun does something that American Dad perfected, and that's making the world a beautifully weird place for the Smiths to interact with. You have sea giants in this world, eldritch horrors, and of course a magical mountain that a bunch of Pixar people are trying to turn into a movie, which is the most on-brand joke I've ever, I can just imagine them watching that Luca documentary and writing so much content about it. It's glorious. That being said, the episode is never more than the sum of its parts, but if it's some idle Tuesday at 10:30 p.m., I'm not upset if this rerun is on. It's perfectly middle-of-the-road American Dad, and that's okay. Touch the Sun, a Chimborazo adventure, is an Equatorial Bulge supported 7 out of 10. Finally, after over 23 seasons after it was first destroyed, it's time to return to Langley's legendary Boardwalk. We have special guest, wrestling legend Bret Hart, at the reopening, played by, Bret Hart, and of course, the architect of the whole thing is played by a community college superstar, Joel McHale. And it's the Smith family doing their own things on the boardwalk. That's it. That's the whole episode. Stan is humiliated by a kid at an arcade. Steve has to babysit a random kid on the boardwalk and becomes a doting parent. Jeff works his dream job at a taffy factory. Roger and Klaus wait for a table at a restaurant. And Francine tries to get Hayley to be good vibes only while Hayley struggles to take it easy. Hayley then finds out a tsunami is heading for the boardwalk and grapples with ruining the vibes or saving everyone. Eventually, they use the power of taffy to save the day, and it's just a vignette episode about that classic Langley boardwalk. It's again just good classic American Dad. I also love that Bret Hart is just sort of there and it works perfectly. He's the perfect boardwalk relaunch celebrity, Just that not quite, used to be A-tier wrestler, now he is a solid B celebrity and you would believe he's there like Kiss. Again, the guest stars are just having fun with it and you love to see it. Bret Hart does a great job. Joel McHale could have been a little more involved in the episode, but what can you do? It was still fun. The Stan story was a little weak, the Roger and Klaus one dragged a bit, but overall it's just more Hayley good stuff. Are you bored of Hayley yet? Don't worry, we're just getting started. I will say, the jokes were a little soft in this episode, and you can tell it would have done better with just 1 or 2 more weeks of polishing. Just add a couple more jokes in there to really make it sing. Under and over and beside the boardwalk is a taffy stretching 7 out of 10. I'm not really sure how to feel about this episode. I'm genuinely torn. A new clam shack opens up in Langley and everyone is absolutely obsessed at Steve's school except for, you guessed it, Steve. They keep pushing Steve to enjoy the clams and he keeps hiding them until they find out his horrible secret that he does in fact hate the clams. The school ostracizes him, including his friends, and he decides to destroy the clam shack from the inside. He gets a job working at the restaurant under, you guessed it, Roger, and tries to dig up some dirt. However, when he fails, he goes full-on tartar toss Joker with Klaus's encouragement. Snotberry and Toshi have to save Steve from himself as this clam Joker, or Cloaker as I like to call him, and it's kinda odd. There's really only 3 Steve episodes and 6 Hayley episodes, and the Steve episodes of the season are really kinda weak. I appreciate that Klaus is the weird voice in Steve's ear pushing him to be edgier and edgier, but it's just not substantial enough to matter. It never takes that extra step to really sell the joke. Oh, he's got to eat 50 or 500 pounds of clams, but he loves clams, so that'll be fine. It's okay. The B story? Stan and Francine try and figure out whose junk mail keeps getting sent to the house. So they 3D print a guy based off of what they can surmise from the junk mail, and oh look, he's a wacky, silly little guy. There's no way he could be a real dude. He's got a big cowboy hat and everything. And then, turns out he was an actually real guy, and it was a perfect 3D printed copy. Of course. I'm sure I'm gonna get some heat for this, but this episode was really just kinda bland. I love American Dad, and a lot of the season is just sort of okay. It feels 2 steps away from greatness. Now, I don't know how much of the season was impacted by the writer's strike or if anywhere at all, but this episode especially feels half-finished. The violence of the clams is a tart 5 out of 10. Klaus asks Hayley to let him know when it's been 5 minutes while he's playing on his Game Boy, and she's hard at work creating a Hayley version of Orange Julius's. However, when Hayley isn't deemed mature enough to adopt a hamster, she realizes she needs to grow up, and Roger decides to help her by playing a young Jewish girl and her absent father. The girl being absolutely obsessed with Dirty Dancing and wanting to have her own awakening. Yeah, it's an entire episode focused around Hayley, Roger, and Dirty Dancing. That's it. It's okay. Hayley takes Roger to a church's chicken church where he gets a crush on the priest, played by Skylar Astin, who's quickly taken out by the mob. You could tell he was supposed to be Patrick Swayze, and that's okay. Hayley keeps failing to set Roger on the right track and eventually also gets taken down by the mob and goes to heaven, where heaven is just the set of Dirty Dancing where she works the boom mic. They keep talking about how perfect the movie is and how inspirational it was, and I don't know, it's kind of weird enough that they're obsessing over it for it to be funny. Funnily enough, they talk about how Jerry Orbach got upset when he got hit on set during a snowball fight, but they never mention how Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey didn't get along, which is funny because Jennifer Grey actually guest stars in the episode as Baby and shows up several more times in the season. I imagine they would have gotten Patrick Swayze to play the priest if he wasn't, seductively making pots in the sky. It's a fun idea. I'm tired of the whole Hayley has to grow up idea, but at least they keep trying with it. Oh, and the B story to break up all of this wonderful awakening and everything? There isn't one. The rest of the family was stuck in the walk-in freezer for the entire episode. So, really hope you enjoy Dirty Dancing. This honestly feels like a very Fox-era episode. Not quite weird enough to be TBS, And that's coming from an episode where Hayley works the boom mic on Dirty Dancing. It just doesn't work. It was okay, but definitely one of the more shallow parodies they've done. An Adult Woman is a hamster deserving, Orange Julius blending, 6 out of 10. I already talked about this episode in my top 10 guest stars video, but man oh manity, this might be my favorite episode of the entire season. Steve is really, really great at the cello, which is a fantastic attention to detail. He tells Stan he plays rugby, but when Stan sees Steve perform, he's blown away and applauds his son's talent. Roger is a maestro conducting Steve's orchestra, and whenever he sees Stan and Steve getting along, he tries to take Steve out because he has haunting flashbacks of his persona's dad abandoning him during one of his shows. Stan and Steve work to help Roger's persona get over its issue, and when they go to Germany to fix it, they find out it's not the persona's dad that caused his trauma, but actually Roger's real dad, Fred, played by American Dad superfan Michael Imperioli. I'm not going to rehash everything I said about his performance, but it's really, really solid. And you can tell he genuinely loves the show. This could have been a jumping the shark moment, and yet it actually works. It's a perfectly crafted moment for Roger to actually grow as a character. He doesn't need to grow, but it's nice to see them giving him a story like this. The B story has Jeff building a birdhouse and being taken advantage of by the new feathery tenants, and Francine and Hayley take up butchering as their side hobbies. Every bit of this screams classic TBS American Dad. You have a stellar guest star, a fantastic Steve, Stan, and Roger story, and a pretty fun, quick B story that gives the A story plenty of time to breathe. Even Maurice LaMarche is amazing in this as Roger's persona's dad. It does everything it needs to do masterfully, and it all culminates in one of the best jokes of the season. Most of the episode takes place in Germany, and they actually draw your attention to the fact they didn't use Klaus at all until the end of the episode. That's just genius. That's art. That's an actual attempt to subvert expectations and get that one last joke in that you probably didn't even notice until you go back and rewatch. It's just great dadage. Piece by Piece is a well-orchestrated 10 out of 10. It's our Christmas episode! It's actually our first mid-season Christmas episode since season 12, if you can believe it. And it's fine. Hate that I'm saying that a lot this season. It's time for the yearly CIA Christmas party, and Stan and the family get dumped at the loser party while Bullock throws a super fancy soiree. You'll be hearing soiree several times in the script. I just like saying it. Stan and Klaus try to sneak into the party, and Stan convinces a woman to let him be her +1. That woman? You guessed it, Mrs. Claus. Turns out the reason Stan wasn't invited was because Santa was performing at the party and didn't want to see Stan during his rocking resurgence as a lead singer. Cool. Santa and Mrs. Claus fight. Mrs. Claus uses Stan to make Santa jealous. Yada, yada, yada. It's kinda just a sorta there Christmas episode. Oh, Stan learns the importance of spending the holidays with his family and appreciating what he has. That would be nice if there wasn't like 5 Christmas specials about that already. Oh look, Santa isn't trying to take them out anymore and he just escaped the Jingleverse. Okay. There's nothing really to compel you to keep watching the episode, and it just sort of drags you along through each of the points until the end where it just goes, hey buddy, Merry Christmas, thanks for watching. I don't know. Is it the worst Christmas special? No, not really, though I will admit I've softened a little on Yule, Die, Repeat, but it's still, I don't know where I'd put this. It's definitely not the best. It's nowhere near the best. This was actually a struggle Christmas episode to watch. Maybe it is the worst. It's a middle-of-the-road special that if you hadn't seen it before, it would entice you into finding out what the Jingleverse is, while delivering a perfectly serviceable rerun quality Christmas special. It doesn't build on anything, it doesn't fall away from anything, it is just its own thing, yet is a part of the Santa story for some reason. It's okay. Nasty Christmas is a blue dabba-dee-dabba-da 5 out of 10. Stan wants a Bugatti, but gets told by Roger's financial advisor persona, Susie or woman, that he needs to make his assets work for him. The family realizes that Jeff is a mooch, and they do this whole noodly Cuphead / classic 1920s, 1930s animation style musical number about how he's a mooch that honestly had a lot of potential, and then the whole musical thing just sort of ends. They could have kept cutting back to it or something, but nope, they just sort of keep moving on past it, which is a downright shame, because the rest of the episode is whelming. Jeff gets a job as a wrecking ball operator, gets injured, and all of a sudden, Jeff's rich! Woo! Hayley tries to protect Jeff from the family, and they go to court to get a conservatorship to get control of his money. Roger then getting custody to use his money to build a giant resort and casino. I'll say this, the concept of the episode is pretty weak, but the jokes are some of the best of the season. Steve's 1-star art reviews, perfection. Some of the best line delivery of the entire season. The glitter in the car, masterful. It's so pretty, but it stings so bad. Art. I dare say, the jokes are some of the best timed jokes American Dad has had in the TBS era. If you are not paying attention to the story, this is just a fun, funny episode. The actual plot of the episode, meh. It's not a particularly captivating Jeff episode, and it doesn't really do much to stand out compared to some of the much stronger episodes we've gotten in the past. It just feels like more of the same, which again is a shame, because they do have fantastic jokes and that great start to a musical number that never gets a proper payoff. Again, it feels like there's quite a few half-baked ideas this season that were just kind of thrown out there without actually having the time to polish them up. We still get high highs, but these lows are getting too frequent for me. Idiot Rich is a laughing gas supported 6 out of 10. I think this episode is the reason why I have such a problem with An Adult Woman. Hayley is interning at Morning Mimosa and is determined to really make a change with her journalism career. Look at that. Hayley still wants to pursue journalism. She wants those hot scoops. A callback to well before the TBS era. Isn't that nice? Isn't that refreshing? Genevieve Vivant's getting that call out. Hayley starts working with Trish and Suze and gets a secret message about a dark secret of famed animal handler Todd Fox, played by Spartacus's own Liam McIntyre, who would show up several times throughout the season. She keeps investigating, even as the producer, played by Will Forte, tells her not to and to stop hassling Trish and Suze, and we find out that Trish and Suze used to be actual reporters with dreams and aspirations before getting day drunk in Papa-Sans. We see the producer was actually the one that pushed them to become the chaotic daytime talk show they are today, and it is just a little too real in the best possible way. The jokes are fantastic, and it's the best Trish and Suze have ever been. They could have just been something in the background, and yet, not only have we had Greg and Terry, but also we have Trish and Suze. Think about it. There is no daytime talk show in Family Guy that is even an iota as iconic as Morning Mimosa. Morning Mimosa has become an institution of TBS, and the fact that Trish and Suze, these side characters, are strong enough to be leads in an A story, it's wonderful. It's a great Hayley adventure that shows her what striving for success gets you, and it's just terrific. You get a killer octopus, fantastic jokes, and a little bit of a heartfelt message. And the B story? The entire family gets food poisoning from squidding paella, and they all have to count on Jeff to save them until he too can't deny the temptation of the jet black concoction. Episodes like this and Piece by Piece are why I can't say the season is a wash, because they're genuinely some of my favorite episodes of the entire TBS era, and that's saying something. Since there's so many great other choices, it's got that creative core that shows they still care. If nothing else, this reinforces that the writers haven't gotten lazy. They're still trying new things, and it absolutely works. Killer Mimosa is a bathroom destroying 10 out of 10. I'll admit, this episode was so good, I was gonna make a video about just it, and then I didn't. There you go. No, I really did genuinely love this episode. I was going to compare a character in this episode to the James Woods of Family. James Woods to Family Guy is what Kevin Bacon is to American Dad. And I got real deep into it. Had a thumbnail and everything. Nothing. I could not come up with a single word about it because this episode blows any James Woods appearances out of the water. Tuttle is throwing a garden club soiree, see? And Francine wants in on that sweet, sweet floral action, dog. It's great that Francine is just this wild energy who will absolutely shotgun a Four Loko and blast heavy metal while mowing. She is an honest and true force of nature. She tries to get into the garden club and even turns to one of Roger's personas, Mike Madonia, rototiller specialist, to help her. The B story has the rest of the family determined to keep saying yes after stealing the idea from one of Klaus's tea bags. Klaus then goes on to help Francine with her garden. Roger takes Francine to the secret gardening aisle in the woods and builds her an immaculate garden. Tuttle proceeds to destroy it, and Francine is determined to grow it back better than ever with the power of dark garden magic. The Parade of Homes shows up and we get one of our two very special guest stars of the episode. The closer in Brooklyn Nine-Nine's Kira Sedgwick as Kira Sedgwick, and her equally famous husband, Kevin Bacon, played by, Kevin Bacon. I lost it when I heard both of them, and that's such a great callback. Kevin Bacon has been baked into the series as far back as like season 2 or 3, and it's just wonderful seeing it all come full circle. And I love how passionate Kira and Kevin are with their performances, and it's not phoned in at all. It just all seemed like it was in genuinely good fun, and they were loving doing a little Tremors parody in the episode. The jokes are super solid, Klaus is in both stories, which is wild, and Roger isn't the main instigator of the plot this episode. He gives Francine the temptation, but she's the one that ultimately goes against his warnings and gets the more dangerous growth spray and worms. Francine became the antagonist of her own story, and the fact that it's Roger, Francine, Tuttle in this story is just fantastic. I don't know, I adore how simple and yet delightful this episode is, and it really sold the season for me as a whole, having more than one classic hit. The Legend of Mike Madonia, the Rototiller Man, is a roof climbing 10 out of 10. I don't know if this was going to be the norm or not, but here's our next Twilight Zone-esque episode. Francine is frustrated when the family won't open up to her, and she goes to Tuttle's aunt's funeral just to have some kind of connection with anyone. She embarrasses herself and gets kicked out, so she and Roger, who was on a road trip on State Road 69 at the time, nice, end up going to the Clearview Motel and discovered that the attic has been tweaked so that you could go over and spy in people's rooms and peep on their most intimate moments. A bald man brushing hair he doesn't have. Tragic. Francine and Roger get addicted to the temptations of the motel and even hide a body of the previous peeper so they can keep the motel going, slipping further and further into their peeping insanity. When Roger leaves, the motel warps the space-time around itself and prevents him from coming back, leaving Francine alone to be the sole peeper. So, I'm really torn on this episode. The imagery of the owl and the use of the vents and peepholes, I think all of that is absolutely fantastic. I think it is set up brilliantly. I think it's all beautifully storyboarded, and it does show a lot of care. What I don't love is the reason why the motel is the way it is. Turns out the motel was built on the land that was cursed by an ancient peeping caveman to make sure no person could 69 in that area without being peeped on. Like every Twilight Zone / suspenseful episode before this had either no explanation for what was going on or a very simple one, beyond the alcove being a great exception to the rule. The reasoning just detracted from the overall experience of this episode. It's a great Francine story and again looks great, just doesn't really stick the landing. It had a lot of potential, and, still some fine jokes. It did work for a lot of it. And it's just that caveman flashback just did nothing. The Clearview Motel is a new shirt fashioning 8 out of 10. Who's ready for another Hayley episode? Hayley's poser ass gets called out at work by her manager, who informs her she passed her last drug test. She's not even the stoner anymore. She's a big fat nobody. She goes to stoner boot camp and flunks. She does try to do improv with Wayne Brady and gets shunned, and she just ultimately doesn't know who she is until she finds the power of Satanism. She summons some demons after getting a red fox's leg, which is one of the most haunting Sanford and Son parodies of all time, and it's honestly just great. The demons agree to a game of Space Jam basketball and leave. Hayley begins hyping the town up and tries to show she can be somebody, and the demons reveal that they're not gonna play the Space Jam basketball game, and they're just gonna bail so everyone sees what a poser Hayley is, and they disappear. Hayley then has to play against Wayne Brady's improv group in disguise to show she's not just some poser. Now, on paper, as I read this off, this sounds like the most unhinged episode of the season yet and nothing entertaining. And it kinda is. But all the pieces fit perfectly in place. I was crying when Steve started to belt out his "I Believe I Can Fly" inspired anthem, "If I can perceive it, I can achieve it." That is just unequivocally hysterical. The public domain characters they've busted out. Charles Barkley straight up just guest starring in it, so they have a cameo from someone in Space Jam. That's wonderful. Watch Charles Barkley's SNL bits. They're great. And then to have the whole town believe in Hayley, even though they know there's not going to be a real Space Jam, is amazing. They're just happy she got the town together. It's so good. It works on every level. I love this episode more than most. I would say this is one of the best Hayley episodes of the entire show, and the more American Dad you've watched, the funnier this is, even as they joke about not knowing how old Hayley actually is. It's perfect. The Girl Who Cried Space Jam is a hell-raised 10 out of 10. Francine wants the family to live longer and adopt a more Blue Zone lifestyle. They start eating more Greek food, adopt a Mediterranean lifestyle, and are partying more and more in the best way possible. They're trying to be healthy, and, well, sure enough, Stan loses an old man friend in the night and fears he won't live long enough to complete his bucket list. Roger's persona lends a hand and starts infusing him with every shot known to man and regulating his every second to min-max the aging process. That's the whole episode too. No real B story to break it up. Just Stan fearing death. Again. You've seen the episode before, and no amount of Greenland shark discourse is going to change my mind on that. It's fine. Oh wow, Stan learns about not taking his family for granted and wants to improve himself thanks to being motivated by Jason Statham. Neat. Oh cool, Roger makes Stan effectively immortal with the power of Greenland sharks, and Stan gets to witness the plates of Pangea colliding as he jams out a guitar solo. It's odd when something that out there still feels so paint by numbers. Where The Girl Who Cried Space Jam is funnier if you've seen more American Dad, I think Get Him to the Greek Lifestyle is better if you haven't seen that much at all. The fewer Stan episodes you've seen in the past, the better. The jokes are still fine, and overall it's an okay episode, but it's too familiar to care about it too much. It just feels like an episode made for reruns. This season feels like it's made for reruns, where you're just adding it into this mix of syndication and not actually going that extra step with any of these stories. It's just, it's not the worst episode of the season, but it's definitely close. Get Him to the Greek Lifestyle is a souvlaki savoring 5 out of 10. When Danuta goes missing, it's up to Hayley to infiltrate the Bazooka Shark cheer squad to find her missing friend, with the help of the two greatest garage-based detectives out there, Wheels and the Leg Man. Bow, 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 bow. Yeah, that's right. It's another Hayley episode with zero B story getting in the way. They go to try out, and this is when we get our bevy of guest stars. The judges would be played by the wickedly funny Gecko, Kristen Chenoweth, and the ghost-busting supermarket sweep reviving Leslie Jones. Pauline Chalamet, Robin Thede, Avantika, and Dasha Polanco also guest star. And so, yeah, Hayley goes deeper into the Shark Girls and moves her way up the ranks while learning how much hard work Danuta has put into her hobby that she mocked. As Hayley moves up, she starts getting threats, and it's revealed that one of the judges was actually kidnapping the girls and ruining their careers so that she could take the top spot on the pyramid and take out the team owner that cut her from the squad because she was too old. It's fine. Not the weakest Hayley episode of the season, not the strongest, just sorta there. The episode at least fills the full 22 minutes and never feels like it's dragging, and the Roger bits are pretty great, but overall it's honestly the weakest Wheels in the Leg Man episode. Steve isn't really doing anything. He's not elevating the episode. You could have just had Roger sneak in with Hayley, not as Wheels in the Leg Man, and he would have just blended in, like he did in Hot Scoop, where he joins the cult alongside her. It just, I don't know. I get the mystery of the missing bazooka shark babe. Like, yeah, I get that it's a Wheels in the Leg Man idea, but it was not a good Wheels in the Leg Man adventure. Steve, audits taxes and is just there. Roger is pushing judges down cliffs in carts to take their place and show who has the sizzle. Like, I love that. I love all of Roger's bits. Steve does nothing. And it's just an okay episode overall. The mystery of the missing bazooka shark babe is a pyramid climbing 7 out of 10. Hayley and Jeff are having relationship issues. Yay. New Hayley episodes. So many Hayley episodes. Season of Hayley. Jeff wants more romance in the bedroom, and Hayley doesn't want to open up, thus a rift forms. Roger tries to help them through their intimacy issues. Oh, look, a B story. Well, maybe those will be great. Sometimes the B story is why the episode is any good at all. Bullock does a whole Marie Kondo, does this bring me joy with the CIA, and discards everything he doesn't need while reminiscing about his skating days. Huh. Yeah, I got nothing. It's a nice spin that it's Hayley not opening up rather than Jeff, and does kind of show a parallel between her and Stan, both having intimacy issues from time to time, but it just again feels so paint by numbers. Oh look, Jeff is gonna get his brain pig beamed so he doesn't need any affection, but then Hayley saves him by being honest and open. It could be a Stan and Francine episode with very minor tweaks. Jeff really hasn't had much time to shine this season, and as we round the corner on the end, it's really just gonna unfortunately stay that way. It's an overall whelming adventure that stunts any momentum you have while watching the season through in a marathon setting. Pork and Feelings is a basketball appreciating 4 out of 10. Greg gets a plaque at his house showing it's a historical landmark. Stan gets jealous because he too wants to be somebody. Oh boy. Well, I know what the plot of this episode is. We're introduced to Glenn, the Historical Society leader, played by the brilliantly bald Bob Balaban. Bob Balaban, the man in That Thing, including Seinfeld. He's actually a really fun part of this episode you've definitely seen before. Wow! While looking for a reason that the house is a historical landmark, they find that it used to be an old brothel and the house gets turned into a museum. Wowie zowie! The family is hesitant, but Stan shares a painful backstory about how he wants to be somebody after losing a competition by being thrown into a sewer, and the family jump on board to help. I will at least admit that them acknowledging Stan's traumatic past was pretty great. They're willing to jump in and do anything with him at a moment's notice because they genuinely love him, and Stan will almost definitely always take it too far. Sure enough, when people come to the museum just to watch the family, they all leave and Stan stays behind to be with Glenn and his real family. Glenn proceeds to push Stan out and replace the family with actors to entice more people in, and yep, that's really it. A pretty nothing experience, all things considered. The final part in the Benjamin Franklin Museum with all of them dressed as the family is a great touch though, and I did really love it. Again, could be the writer's strike, could be burnout. Either way, it's noticeable, especially compared to season 18. Not to say that that was a perfect season, but definitely a more balanced one. "O Brothel, Where Art Thou" is a swing accented 5 out of 10. When Rogu gets sick, the family doesn't know what's going on and try to cure him while judging Roger for being a bad parent and not knowing anything about his own tumor. That's the whole episode. No B story, just sick Rogu. Rogu getting sicker and the family getting more and more creative with what it could be, while Roger refuses to feel guilty or change. That's it. I appreciate that everyone loves Rogu and they're trying to help him. Rogu has earned his place in the family and you do actually feel for him a bit. He is one of the best additions for the TBS era now. I love Rogu, and if you don't like Rogu, we can fight in Minecraft. But even then, even with a great performance by D. Bradley Baker, who owns Rogu now, who does all these great Rogu bits, even in this episode, the episode is so dull. It's so nothing. This is an episode that would have thrived off of having a B story. So many of these episodes would have done better with literally anything to break them up just a little bit. Sure, Roger taking Rogu to a theme park is funny, but give us something fresh to cut to. It just doesn't do anything outstanding. It was an episode I completely zoned out on. Oh look, Rogu was sick from sarin gas in the bubble wrap of the candles he eats for his YouTube content, and Roger being clean and healthy was making him worse, I guess. Neat. By the way, if you want me to eat candles for content, comment below. This final block of episodes really is such a toss-up. It feels less like a grand finale and more like a running out of steam. I would have loved more Rogu this season, but this is what we get, I guess. And again, I have to point out, this is probably the funniest Rogu has been in a while. It's just, this episode is just sort of there. The sickness is a wax munching 3 out of 10. It's summer vacation! Steve is determined to do something big this summer, and so he gets to work on making an app with the help of two super best friend super buddies, Klaus and Principal Lewis. The whole saga is told through different raps and beats, and honestly, I love it. I don't love Hideki, Toshi's dad, being a pivotal element of it, but I get it, there's only so much you can do. He just doesn't have to be a part of every entrepreneur story. It gets tiring. Sure enough, he becomes a financier and invests in the company while doing a buyout of Steve. Wow, like he's done every single story he's been a part of. That's so cool. Steve's idea was a social media app just for kids, and that's honestly hysterical that it's sold as a good idea. Again, the musical numbers make the A story actually entertaining and bring a much needed element that elevates the whole thing. Principal Lewis just adds that much more great energy to the musical bits. The story is simple, but the music makes it fun. Me clap at funny moments. The B story has the rest of the family upset when the cable industry fails and they have no way to watch their precious ridiculousness. They become cord cutters, pick up other hobbies, then go back to streaming TV. It's just more of the same. Where other episodes would benefit from a B story, this one I'd argue deserved to be a standalone A story that they went all in on. Just another great musical episode. If they only had two half-finished ideas and just smashed them together, I get that. But man, you just hate to see it. Silicon Steve is a kid beloved 5 out of 10. I'm going to do these last two episodes in their broadcast order because I think that works better just overall. When Steve needs help with his fractions homework, Stan turns on an old supercomputer, Guardian, and proceeds to use it to do his fractions and accidentally frees it from its digital prison, where it quickly takes over the entire world. Steve gets taken in by the Pentagon, and we get a general played by Neil McDonough, Darcy Carden, and Eugene Cordero also guest star. Stan doesn't get Steve's memes, and Steve thinks Stan is super smart when really everyone is just super dumb this episode. which is kind of the point, weird enough. The B story has Francine, Hayley, Jeff, and Klaus pranking Roger because he mocked them for enjoying deja vu. They trick him into thinking he has deja vu and he gets all excited just for Guardian to trigger the actual end of days. Stan and Steve save the day by showing Guardian a dumb meme and it tries to take itself out. It's a very Fox era episode. If this was from season 7 or 8, it would fit right in. It just doesn't feel like a TBS episode at all. Even the "you love us" at the end with Stan and Steve feels very Fox. And that's not bad. If anything, it felt incredibly nostalgic. Like, watch it with the expectation of a Fox episode, and it actually really works. In the context of this season, it doesn't, but I think a casual viewer that sees a rerun of this episode on some Wednesday night will probably love it. It has all the trademarks of a Fox-era American Dad episode. Stan is weirdly political this episode. He's bringing up actual thought, like, he has opinions about things that he hasn't had in a long time. He is very conservative this episode. There's political satire, and it's fun. It's a good episode in those regards. As a TBS era, yeah, it stands out. But if you just watch it after a Fox era episode, it really kind of works. I went and tested it, and sure enough, yeah, Guardian's not that bad if it's out of this season. Guardian is a meme appreciating 7 out of 10. And here we are, the end of the TBS era. While Guardian would technically be the season finale by episode order, this would be the last new episode to air on TBS proper. The episode starts as a silent movie about Stan as a farm boy dreaming of going to the big city and finally becoming a somebody. A big, important inventor type. His mom sells her beloved quilt to fund his trip and he heads out to the industrial new age. It's a lot like old Chaplin movies, like Modern Times, and the fact they stuck with silent movie elements for so long is terrific. Eventually, Stan invents a robotic voice beetle that allows people to actually talk, and as his empire grows, he creates a device that adds color to their black and white world. Hayley and Steve are trying to unionize the industry, and Stan becomes the big shot he always wanted to be, eventually getting shot by his mom and taken home so he can appreciate the simple things again. The story is simple, and there's not a ton of jokes, but there is a lot of Chaplin callbacks and callbacks to movies of that era. But that's not really the point of this episode. Throughout the episode, you literally watch the city get more creative and lively. A perfect symbol of how the TBS era has grown and evolved. Look at how big and weird Langley is now. How many supporting characters like Tuttle got a new lease on life and got reimagined and reworked into the now classic characters they are today. This is a celebration of the creativity at the core of American Dad. I don't think anyone could say at this point American Dad is just another Family Guy clone. This episode proves that time and time again, American Dad has earned its spot up there with the greats. Sure, yeah, there's American Dad on Fox on the bookcase and all these little Easter eggs to spot, like the Ozymandias book, but I'm not about to do a deep dive into all of those. That's for some other picktuber to bother with. This is a beautiful send-off to the show on TBS and is a perfect marriage of the creativity, comedy, and character growth that made the show so truly spectacular. This episode is the come down from the fever dream stamp-licking hallucination that is the TBS era. Wherever the show goes from here, the TBS era ended on a high note. What grand advancements is a small thing appreciating? 10 out of 10. There we have it. That's season 19. Anything you think I was right on, wrong on? What was your favorite episode? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw, consider liking, subscribing, and telling your friends. We're out here. I was not expecting this to be the end of the TBS era. I really thought we'd have more time. yet I'm not devastated we ended with season 19. There were some very high highs and some very low lows, and I think that's just American Dad at this point. I have new episodes I'd throw into my rotation of reruns and episodes I'd never want to watch again. And 19 seasons in, that's genuinely saying something. American Dad will always be something special, and while I'm skeptical of a return to Fox, I'm cautiously optimistic. Anyway, that's going to do it for us here at the Lecture Hall. Like what you saw and want to support the channel? Consider joining our membership or Patreon programs today. $2 a month gets you special polls, posts, and even your name on this fancy list. Look at these heroes going by. And hey, there's actually new videos coming out again. Thank you all so much for watching. We're back, and obviously we'll be doing a big TBS era video soon. Also, I have another project I'll be working on and a very fun guy approved series. You won't want to miss that. Like always, stay strong, keep fighting that good fight, and remember, you matter. It's okay to not be okay, and so long as you woke up today, I'm proud of you. A rising tide lifts all ships, and I can feel one hell of a wave a-coming. Goodbye, everybody, and I'll see you all next time.